Right people, welcome back to the channel. Or should I say, welcome to the jungle. Because that is the way things are getting in this world at the moment. It's like living in the jungle. Survival of the fittest. I've come across this video on about excess deaths. It's by a Dr. John Hampson, whatever his name is. And I find it rather alarming, to say the least. So let's have a listen. We won't go through all of it, because it's quite a long video he's put out. So, with no further ado, let's have a listen.
Well, a warm welcome to this talk. It's Saturday the 23rd of December. Now, I want to review excess deaths which remain high in the vast majority of our countries throughout 2023. Now, the fact that this isn't being discussed on mainstream media or legacy media, the fact that this is not top of the agenda in Parliament, really begs the question, why is this not being discussed on mainstream media? Why is this not top of the agenda in Parliament and Senate and Congress or whatever? It really is getting a bit, let's use the word strange, that this is not being discussed. Now, I've got some pretty hard data for you this morning that I've been working on for a little while now. This is mostly from, I'm going to concentrate on 2023, but we'll look at 2022 as well. Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD STAT. So a pretty well recognised site. Now, I've been taking data from quite a few sites like CDC, Office for National Statistics, quite a few others, Our World in Data, but the OECD data is consistent. This is not some aberration. This is happening, and it's on a huge scale, totally huge scale. Let's dive in straight away with Australia. Now, for weeks 1 to 34 in 2023 in Australia, there was 14,710 excess deaths, 16.8% above what we would expect, based on the 2015 to 2019 average. So 16.8% more deaths than we would expect in Australia in the first 34 weeks of 2023. Incredible, really. Now, the COVID deaths, according to the Australian authorities, or according to OECD, just under 5,000. So we can see that only a minority of these deaths were COVID deaths. Now, these deaths that are attributed to COVID, of course, we're not going to go into the debate of with COVID or from COVID, but the vast majority of these people, pretty well all of these, had significant age factors or comorbidities. For the vast majority of people, me last month, for example, COVID is a relatively minor disease. It knocks you off for a week or two, but it's not a life-threatening disease for the vast majority of people. So I suspect that these are people in vulnerable risk groups primarily. Australia 2022, the whole year, weeks 1 to 52, the number was 29,738, 18.7% above what we would expect. Add the two together and you get 44,448 excess deaths in Australia. So, you know, we're looking at about 17-18% excess deaths in Australia. Is this an isolated case? Of course not. Let's go on and look at Austria. Weeks 1 to 44, 2023, 4,444, 6.5% above what we would expect. Is this another unusual case? Not by any means. Let's go on and look at Canada. Canada, 2023 data. So first 33 weeks, it's all that's available. 28,400 Canadians died, more than we would expect, 16.7% more than we would expect. COVID deaths in Canada are attributed to 4,613, and as we said, that's the upper estimate. But of course, if we compare that 4,613 with the 28,400, again, we see that the vast majority of deaths are not COVID related. We cannot blame this on COVID. There is other factors, or factors probably, almost certainly, contributing to this. But it's just everywhere, virtually everywhere. We'll see there are some exceptions. Canada 2023, it was 61,000 excess deaths, 22.3% above average. Add the two together, excess deaths in Canada, 89, nearly 90,000 excess deaths. Denmark, weeks 1 to 44, 3,052, 6.9% above average. And again, maybe just over 11% of those attributable to COVID. Denmark 2022, it was 11% excess deaths, and you add the two together, for a small country you get 8,923 excess deaths during those 2 years. Of course, this is when Omicron was around, much less deadly. Finland, 10.5% more deaths than we would expect in the first 44 weeks of 2023. France, 22,268, 4.9% more than we would expect. For COVID deaths, again, less than a quarter. So 5,565 deaths attributed to COVID. 22,268 excess deaths. So we can see that the vast majority of these are not COVID deaths. France 2022, it was 11.9% above what we would expect, with 71,000 excess deaths. Germany, first 44 weeks of 2023, 59,000 excess deaths, 7.7% above average. 2022, it was 14.9% above average. Dealing with really high numbers of excess deaths, and as we'll see, these are wartime levels of excess deaths in many situations. We'll go on. Greece, 5.2% more than we would expect first 44 weeks of 2023.
A lot.
Iceland, weeks 1 to 44, 2023, 11.5% more deaths than we would expect. Tiny population, of course, in Iceland. They attribute no deaths to COVID, so all of these deaths would be non-COVID according to the OECD report on Iceland. It just shows the way that different countries are monitoring and registering this differently. We can't.
So you've got a lot of excess deaths. Some of them are due to COVID. So what else is going on to cause all these excess deaths? As you heard there, it's not on mainstream media. It's not being talked about in the House of Parliament or whatever country's governments. There's something else going on.
Not really compare country with country, but I think we're starting to see a trend of massive excess deaths in 2022, continued as far as we have data throughout 2023. Why is the silence deafening? Why? Israel. Israel, weeks 1 to 44, 2023.
Personally, these excess deaths are not due to COVID. Well, quite a lot of them are not due to COVID itself. I think it's to do with the old That's what I think.
11.8% more deaths than we would expect. COVID deaths, 640. So again, that's the COVID deaths, that's the excess deaths. The vast majority not COVID deaths. Israel 2022, 15.4% above the average that would be expected based on the 5-year average. And because of population growth in many areas, these are minimum figures. So the excess deaths are actually potentially higher because we're comparing to 5 years with a slightly lower population. Italy, interesting, Italy, bit of an exception. So first 44 weeks, basically what we would expect, basically no real percentage change, 0.28. Interesting. Are they collecting data differently in Italy? Is the OECD, the source of the OECD data differently? But there are a few other outliers as well. That outlier is harder to explain. So perhaps some anomalies in data collection there, but I wanted to include it in because we don't want to give a distorted picture, as many unfortunately do. Netherlands. First 44 weeks, 11.3% more deaths than we would be expected. In 2022, it had been 13.2. Again, that's for the whole of 2022. 13.2% more deaths than we would expect. New Zealand, first 44 weeks of 2023, 14.5% more deaths than we would expect. 3,960 actual people dying, more than we would expect. In 2022, it had been 17.6% more than we would expect. Don't worry, it's worse when we get to the UK and the US. Norway, 5.7% more than we would expect 2023, 12.5% more than we would expect in 2022. Portugal, 6.3% more than we would expect. Spain, 3.7% more than we would expect. Switzerland, 3.9% more than we would expect in 2023. Now, coming on to the UK. Weeks 1 to 44, 2023, where we have data, 49,389. Number just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? 9.44% more than we would expect. These are excess deaths. COVID deaths, according to the UK, again, don't believe for a moment it's that many directly attributable to COVID, but we can see that there's many more deaths not attributable to COVID. UK in 2022, we lost 52,514, more than we would expect, 9.26%. Add the two together, 2022 was 2023, we get 101,903 excess deaths in the United Kingdom during those periods of time. Now, I kind of hesitated to put this in, but I've done it, so I'm going to give it to you. Height of the Blitz, the bombing in the Second World War, 1940 to May 1941. Civilian deaths were 40,000, terrible. But we lost 100,000 in these 2 years. We've lost, first 44 weeks of the year, just shy of 50,000, just for the first 44 weeks of 2023. And of course, the Blitz just completely influenced British culture. You know, this is what I was brought up with, this legacy. There'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover. This is just massive in British culture. Maybe not so much now, but certainly my generation. And yet way more excess deaths. In 1940, we saw the country turned upside down. Children evacuated to various parts of the country, massive defences put in place, the country on a complete war footing. Now, what do our current generation of politicians do? Walk out the chamber when someone tries to talk about it. What the heck is going on here? Total civilian deaths in World War II, 70,000. So the last couple of years, excess deaths for reasons that aren't being explained, aren't even being addressed, for questions that aren't even being asked. More deaths than civilian UK deaths in World War II. We lost a lot more combatants than that, but they were civilian deaths. United States. Week 1 to 37, 2023, the OECD data. 155,000 more Americans died than we expect. Attributable to COVID, 76,000. Again, quite how accurate that is, we don't have full data, but we can see a lot of people died that's not attributable to COVID. 7.8% more than we would expect dying. In 2022 in the United States, it was getting on for 500,000, 495,749, 17.53% above what we would expect. Add together the 2 years, so the 155,000 that died in 2023, that's only the first 37 weeks, of course, where we have data. They're getting on 500,000 that died in 2022, we get 651,500.
Well, I'm going to leave that there. But that paints a picture. As you said there, something weird is going on. It's not even being discussed in the Houses of Parliament, in the Houses of Commons. The minute someone tries to talk about it, they just get up and walk out. So what is going on? They're obviously hiding something. The question is, what? Do your own research and see if you can find out what is going on. Why is it not on mainstream media? Why is it not being talked about in the House of Commons and the Houses of Parliament? Why when someone tries to bring it up in the House of Commons, they walk out? Or they try and bring it up in the Houses of Parliament, people get up and walk out. Why? What is going on? Not all these access deaths are due to COVID. There's something else going on. What is it? I'll leave it there. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I must pray that 2024 is not as bad as 2023, because some people are saying 2024 is going to be worse. Some people are saying that we're on the, right on the verge of another global war. Let's hope they're wrong. Let's pray that 2024 brings happiness and prosperity to everyone, instead of hardship and misery like the last couple of years have brought. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.